There we go. So before some of you leave because you think that I don't need a remote job, I've got my own business, or I'm freelancing, I'm not looking for a job, some of the things, or most of the things that I'm teaching today can be translated not just to a job working for a company, but actually getting freelance clients or actually getting clients for your business as well. So as Anna mentioned, been nomadic, but only a digital nomad for the last officially 2 or 3 years. I was working as a recruiter for many, many years, working for a company, pretty happy. And as with most people, the pandemic gave me a bit of a new perspective. So before that, I was actually pushing for remote work policy at the company I worked for. I was hiring a lot of developers, and a lot of those developers were saying, hey, I don't want to come to an office, especially 5 days a week. So I'm like, okay. Nagged and pushed the corporate company I work for, which I used to work with Erica, and we've met again 6 years later. And eventually, after about a year of nagging, I got there, and the most I could get was up to 4 days a week remote. But that 1 day a week that we had to go in, that was still not enough freedom for me. I lived in a camper van at the time, and I really wanted to go through Europe, but instead I just had to cope with the UK. But as a lot of you know, the weather's not too great there, so it was a bit cold in the winter. So I hired across all continents pretty much, other than Antarctica, and I have helped hundreds of people to get a remote job since setting up Remote Rebellion after working in recruitment. So I'm going to ask a question to some of you. Cast your minds back to 2021. How many of you were looking for a remote job in 2021, whether that was freelance, whether that was permanent? Any of you? 1, 2, okay. So about 5 of you. Keep your hands up for a second. And put your hands down if you found a job within 3 months of looking. Most people, okay? Now, hands up if you've been applying in the last 12 months for either freelance work or permanent jobs. Okay, around about the same. And hands down if you found a job within those 3 months. Okay. So I'm actually quite surprised because the market's pretty difficult at the minute, and people are getting really frustrated. They're feeling like they're banging their head against a brick wall. They're getting ghosted, or worse still, they're just getting no responses. And it's really not your fault if that's the thing that's happening, because the market has changed. It's so much more competitive now than it was back in 2021. So of all jobs, this was in October 2022 that they did these stats. LinkedIn did this study that only 15% of jobs were remote, and of those 15%, 50% of all applications went to those 15%. So it's no wonder it's so competitive, and it's why you need a bit of a different approach. So where to start? It's quite difficult because it can sometimes feel a little bit like this little fellow on the left. You've got this big slope to climb up and you don't know how to get there. So as with most things, breaking it down into step-by-step makes it so much easier. I'd like to credit my illustrations here that my friend Nina let me steal from Digital Nomads Daily. I didn't create these, they're pretty awesome. So these are the 6 steps, and like I said to you, these don't just apply necessarily to getting a remote job, but they can also apply to getting freelance clients, to getting clients for your business. You've really got to break it down first. The first step being analysis. So you wouldn't go and build a house without getting an architect in to look at it and see where the windows were going to go, where the doors are going to go, and how every single little thing was going to be measured. You wouldn't just go and start building a house. The same way you wouldn't start you need to lay the foundations. It's very, very similar. Some of you might be thinking, I know what kind of job I want. This is the job title, this is the location, but how specific have you got? What kind of industries do you want to work in? What kind of salary do you want? What's the market paying? What level of remote are you happy with? Do you want a work from anywhere job? Are you okay with it being remote from Europe or from your country? And what time zones are you willing to work in? Your non-negotiables are super important. This goes with anything in life. What are you willing to be flexible on, and what are you really not willing to be flexible on? These are important, but for just going for anything and just being available for anything, you're not going to attract the right kind of things. The same way in the dating world. You're not just going to go on a date and be like, please love me, because you're going to come across quite desperate and you're not going to attract the right kind of people. It's the same way going into interviews, being like, I'll just take any job. So as Antoine, I'm not going to say his surname and butcher it in my English accent, but a goal without a plan is just a wish. So avoid just aimlessly scrolling on LinkedIn, as most people do. They go on there without a plan and they just look for things but don't actually know what they're looking for. That's why the analysis step before is super important. Mindset, confidence, manifesting and visualizing what you want is great, but it's not enough on its own, of course. You need to be doing the action. And some people think they just need to do a numbers game and just apply for as many things as they can. But that's not going to work either, because what happens then is you get into a loop where you're applying for jobs. They say no, and you didn't even want that job in the first place. So you're getting rejected by companies and jobs that you didn't even want. You're nodding here, right? You're like, I didn't even want that job. I'm way overqualified for it. So be more mindful in the applications that you're making and the reach outs you're making to clients. Are these actually the kind of people that I want to work with? Is it the kind of company I want to work for? Keeping the pipeline full. For anyone who's ever worked in recruitment or sales, it's about keeping that pipeline full. You're not just going applying to things, you're also planting the seeds at the same time as actually picking the fruit. So don't just apply for jobs, look for companies you want to apply to and do open applications and target those specific companies. Staying organized with the right tools is really useful. So things like Teal, I'm not affiliated, but I'm going to get affiliated because I think they're just brilliant for anyone who's used them. They're a really good tool for organizing your job search. Then you've got things like Notion or Trello, anything to keep yourself organized and track the jobs that you're applying to. Not just because you can see which ones you've already applied to, but so you can actually reach back out to them if you've not heard in 2 weeks, which you probably won't because everyone's so busy at the minute. But reaching back out has a really good success rate as well. Time blocking, Gonzalo's presentation he did on productivity the other day, super useful. Actually, time blocking according to your productivity. For me, when I wake up in the morning, I'm most productive. So use that time when you're most productive to do the applications, and when you've got the lowest energy, then you can do your scrolling and searching for jobs. So time block it like this. Work harder, not smarter. And then actually finding fully remote jobs. So many people come and say to me, where do I find them? All I'm doing is finding these fake remote jobs or pesky hybrid jobs that require you to come into the office 1 day a week, 1 day a month, whatever that is, with no real reason other than culture. So go to specific and specialist job boards. That's not just remote specific, but specialist in your field. So one of them is Tech for Good Jobs. It's a really good one. Or Find a Sync. So you can actually find asynchronous companies, not just remote. And it could be specialist in your area. They have specialist job boards for remote women. They've got specialist job boards for people of color. They've really got a job board out there for everyone. There's hundreds of them. The second place to find fully remote jobs is targeting remote-first companies and work-from-anywhere companies. They exist. There's lots of them. There's actually thousands of them. And I know some people think, oh, there's not that many out there. Once you start looking for them and you know the right ways to find them, they'll start coming up in your feed. Google Advanced Searching, again, for the recruiters out there, it's kind of reverse engineering the way recruiters search for candidates. We're looking for people by putting in certain keywords, so you can reverse engineer that for looking for jobs. You can put in specific keywords of industry that you want to focus on, remote, whether you want fully, whether you want 100%, and it has to be work from anywhere, and you can look for industries. I wish I had more time, but with the limited time, I can't go into how to do that, but come and see me afterwards if you want to know the hacks on that. And then networking. So we're all here today, so I'm guessing that you, Jan's laughing in there because he got featured in the photo. The networking is super important. This is my second remote work conference this year. So the first one, running remote, this was taken after the event. It's not just about the conference and the people that you're listening to and the things that you're learning, but the people you're connecting with outside of the talks is sometimes even more valuable than the stuff you're listening to. So connect with people. Don't underestimate the power of networking. And don't see it as networking. Just see it as getting to know someone and connecting with them, because you'll end up having relationships with those people and building business, personal relationships that will go on forever. So don't underestimate that. It not only increases the number of opportunities that you see or come across, it also increases the chance of getting a job. Good old nepotism, knowing someone in the company, introductions. I know a mate who can do this and get them in the job. It works, so leverage that. And then private communities. So Living It Up Las Palmas, that's just one Slack community that's brilliant. And most of these Slack communities have a separate channel for jobs as well. So look out in role-specific, industry-specific Slack groups. They'll all generally have a jobs channel. You have them on social media. There's some actually that you'll find jobs that are not on job boards, because job boards charge quite a lot of money to post. So look outside of those normal places. And then I've not even mentioned CV, right? People, that's the first thing they ask me when they come to me. Like, I say, why do you think you're struggling to find a remote job? And they're like, oh, it's my CV's rubbish. I need to work on my CV. That's probably, if I had to give a number, about 20% of the battle. All the other stuff before is just as important in some ways. going to do a little bit of a quiz time now. How long do you think, just shout out some answers, how long do you think the average recruiter spends looking at your CV? You knew the answer. He's giving it away. It's 6 seconds. Did some of you think it was going to be longer, or did you kind of, 6 seconds. Not long. So can you imagine what you can actually see in those 6 seconds? It's probably a title. It's a bit of a summary. It's your name. So you really need to grab that attention. So applying effectively. Your CV is one of the ways to do that. How many pages should my CV be or resume be? Between 2 to 3, but there's no one quick answer. What the important thing is to put in there is to show your value. So many people say, this is my experience, this is what I've done, but they don't actually get across the value they've added in their CV. They personalized cover letter, people are using ChatGPT. It shows a mile off. I'm not saying don't use it. You can use it to maximize your time, but not read it afterwards. Like, make sure you personalize it, tailor it towards the actual job, like you actually really want that job according to you. And then connect with the hiring managers. Be that annoying person who's reaching out to them on LinkedIn or email. Finding their email address is actually a really good tool, and there's loads of different tools that you can get to use because their inbox gets so full on LinkedIn and not everyone uses it the same. Getting their email address and getting in their inbox is a really good way to grab their attention. And track and follow up. Again, be that annoying person, be persistent. If you've not heard from them in about 2 or 3 weeks, reach out again. Here are some things to avoid doing and some of the must-dos. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail because I believe Juliana is going to cover this next. So just to have a little quick scan here. And then networking. We're all here today, so we know the importance of networking, hopefully. But really leverage this. Don't just leave here today and never speak to anyone again. Reach out to the people that you found interesting. Reach out to the people that you could add value to. Introduce people to other people. That's one of the things I've found the most value of, because I get such a buzz when I've introduced someone and then they're friends or they talked at a conference because this person was in this location. So just connect people. It's fun. I like matchmaking. I think I'll be a matchmaker in my next life, actually, once I finish doing this. Connect with them, increasing your visibility. I say this a lot, but just the way Coca-Cola doesn't need to advertise, everyone knows who they are. They still do it because they want to get in your heads. They want you to know, I'm here, I'm the drink of choice. So you want to be that candidate of choice, or that company of choice. And then interviewing impressively is the last steps. So some of the do's and don'ts, some of these are obvious, some of them are not so much. Doing research into the companies are what a lot of people do, and is actually what they spend a lot of time doing. But what you should focus as much attention on is researching the people that you're interviewing with. Having that little commonality of like, oh, they do CrossFit, and then you mention it and just drop it in there. Don't make it obvious if you've researched them, but drop it in there and be like, yeah, so when I do CrossFit, they're like, oh, I do CrossFit too. We're like each other. I'm going to hire you. Like, people hire people who are like themselves. They shouldn't necessarily, but they do. So use that to your advantage. Don't just talk about what you did. Talk about the value that you added. That's a really important thing to do. One thing, don't leave things up to assumptions. This is a really important thing on your CV and your profile and in interviews. Have someone else read your profile so they can see what someone else sees. When you're so tunnel visioned into your own profile, it's really hard to get out of that. So have someone else, even if it's not an expert, someone else reading it that's not in your industry so they can see what they really think of it. Get someone honest as well. So these are the 6 steps. I've highlighted networking because, again, that's what we're here to do today. Don't just think, what can I get out of this? What can I get out of someone immediately? Think about connecting on a real level. And what can you offer to someone as well? I think I am nearly done. I got some nice assistants on a ski resort to provide my table for this one. It was fully staged. I didn't actually work from the ski resort. But yeah, you can scan here if you want a bit more information on me. I believe that links to my LinkedIn on my website. I can't remember. You can tell me. And any questions, come along. Juliana and I are going to be running a workshop on Tuesday on how to optimize LinkedIn to attract the right kind of clients. Time for questions? Yeah, one question maybe? Jan. You've got. Recruiter, not HR. I'm not PC enough to be HR. I think there's a lot more competition, like I mentioned, so there's a lot more applications coming in because a lot more people want to work remotely, but a lot less companies than there were a year and a half ago were able to work remotely. So people have had a taste of what they want as we're all here today. So recruiters simply don't have enough time to go through all of those applications. And I think there's a myth that there's these robots that are assessing all CVs, and most companies don't have that technology. It is usually a human who's viewing that CV first. So they just simply don't have the time to go through them, and that's why you really need to grab their attention and get the networking piece, so you've got a little like side in, essentially. So that's the biggest thing. And companies are laying off in-house recruiters to try and save money as well. So there's again, the pile of the CVs is going up on someone's desk. Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't go to more than one or two specialist ones, but I think going to a recruitment agency it's another soldier in your army, essentially. Going to a recruitment agency, going to networking events, going to job, like, again, it's multiple, like, diversifying in investments, right? So if you go to good ones, of course, go off recommendations, go to good ones, because the bad ones are just going to drain your energy and make you feel crap. So yeah, the good ones. And I can recommend a few if you want to know. Christoph, got time for one more? Yeah, it's a good question. Most of my clients actually get employed by a company. I'd say about 30% of them are working as freelancers, but the majority are going working for a company. And I don't agree with what you said about, that they aren't actually, that they're restricted by laws, by whatever. I just think companies don't want to do it. I think that they don't want to try. They're not. There's EORs now that solve a lot of those issues. They say they can't hire people working from anywhere, but I think it's BS. I think they just don't want to. So, my opinion. Have we got time? Or?
Thanks. So this is, I kind of want to ask you a question from the other side of this. So it might be outside your purview, but I'm going to ask it anyway. From the hiring side, because you touched on something really interesting, which was like the bias that's in somebody who's hiring, the human bias. And I know that, I mean, I'm not in this space, right? So I have some idea that, like, there's tools or resources that people can use when they're on the hiring end to reduce the amount of bias that goes into reviewing an application. I know you said that, like, a lot of this is done on a human level, but if there's anyone else in the room that's, like, looking at hiring and wants to do it a fair way, do you have any recommendations from that end? Because I think that would be a nice way to help people get through the bias.
The unconscious bias and then you've got the conscious bias, right? So I think a lot of it comes down to training. I think it comes down to having a diverse pool of people reviewing the profiles, which is not always, you're not able to do it if you're just a one-person band, right? Like, it's really hard. So I think it comes down to training if you're a larger company, of teaching people, like, the thoughts that we're having. I know I read a book called why white people shouldn't ask about race, or why black people stop asking about race or something. And I remember reading it, feeling really uncomfortable and feeling like a bit annoyed that this person was saying these things. And this person was like, you're probably feeling annoyed now because this is exactly my point. And I remember reading it thinking, wow, I would never, ever class myself as someone who was racist. But after reading this book, there were certain prejudices that I had. And I think people don't want to go into that uncomfortable realm of self-discovery, of realizing the biases that we all have. So I think that's a training level. I think that's doing it on a team level and realizing that we all have these biases, good, bad, whatever it is. Like, for example, we just found out we're from similar hometowns. I'm like, oh, I'm going to hire him because he's from my hometown. But we do it. We all do it because we gravitate to people that are like ourselves. So it's trying to get into the mindset of noting, am I doing this? Okay, am I being fair? And taking a step back in that way. But in terms of tools, I'm sure there are tools. I don't know about them, but I think training is probably more important on a one-to-one or a group level. Okay, we've got one more hand up here. Can we? Time?
Okay, that's the last.
So not a question, but a comment, because I'm also a recruiter, and I'm still actively a recruiter. So to your question, Chris, I'll say I do have some experience working in ATS now that can anonymize resumes in the interface. So not the resume itself, but what is parsed. And that functionality exists to stem some of the bias that comes from names. We know that there's an enormous amount of name bias in hiring. And so anonymizing and pulling out the name of the applicant has been focus grouped quite a bit. It is built into some ATS now, but it's not used as a matter of default. In fact, it's often buried, and you have to work very, very hard to find it and enable it.
That's it. Okay, thanks everyone.